our staff development teachers here at ABC Elementary. Today for our PD, we're going to talk about linguistic diversity in our classrooms and within the United States. Now, we teachers here at ABC Elementary, we are part of 13 schools, and this professional development will be especially helpful for us because of the 13 schools in our district. We have the highest ratio of Hispanic students. Our Hispanic population is 70%. And the reasoning behind this is because where we are in Alhambra, the town that's neighboring us is East Los Angeles, and so we are getting a large number of students on permit from East Los Angeles. Okay, so for our PD, like I had said, it's on linguistic diversity in our classrooms. Each of you has an agenda for today. Here you go, Mr. Smith. And some of the topics that we are going to discuss is what defines an English language learner. So as I go through my notes here, I am going to be, you may be watching the PowerPoint presentation and just follow through with me. So linguistic diversity in the U.S. classrooms. So the first thing we want to ask us is, what exactly is an ELL, or an English language learner? Basically, an English language learner is a student who speaks another language besides English as their native language. And there are over 5 million ELLs enrolled in grades pre-K through 12 here in the United States. And nearly 80% of ELLs are Spanish speaking, and teachers as I said before, here at our school in particular, 70% of our population is Hispanic students. Okay, next slide. Just a brief history of language diversity and the law. Linguistic diversity has commonly been viewed as temporary, troublesome, and basically a barrier to learning. Negative views still hold today, and main reasons for that is the large influx of immigrants coming into our country, and the second incident is the September 11th incident, where these types of incidents have brought sort of a patriotic loyalty towards the country, and basically then putting anybody who does not speak English in a negative light. In 1974, there was a landmark case that actually went to the Supreme Court that ruled unanimously that the civil rights of the Chinese students in San Francisco had indeed been violated. So this was the start of some of these rights going back to our students. The Equal Education Opportunities Act of 1974 was also instrumental in protecting the language rights of our students for whom English is not a native language. And as I'm sure a lot of you know about 1998's Proposition 227, which basically caused bilingual education to be replaced with one of the approaches that is used today, the SEI, or the Structured English Immersion, which I will talk about in a little bit later in our development today. And of course, we all know about the No Child Left Behind law of 2002, which basically repealed the Bilingual Education Act of 1967. And then in 2006, the Senate passed legislation designating English as the national language of the United States. Okay, so before we learn more about some of the approaches to linguistic diversity and how to help these learners, I just want to briefly tell you about what is it. Linguistic diversity and learning is learning which builds upon prior knowledge and experiences of our students. As we all know as teachers that this is very, very important. Language development should be strong. It should be a strong foundation upon what learning should be built on. Now, unfortunately, as we see in our classrooms, we struggle to make this happen, where there's really no foundation of language, but we just pile everything upon. If we keep doing that, if their language development is not that strong for foundation, it's going to crack. Unfortunately, that's what's happening to a lot of our students in our schools throughout the United States of America. Linguistic diversity and learning is having a positive influence of knowing more than one language, and native language maintenance may act as a buffer, actually, against academic failure by supporting literacy in students with their most developed language. Teachers, are we doing okay? Any questions so far? Mr. Smith? No? Okay. So before we get into, we have lots of fun activities planned, but before we get into the activities, I just want to briefly talk about the different program models that are in place for English language learners at the various school sites. There's the structured English immersion, which is students usually placed in separate classrooms, and they learn all of their content in English. And then when they're deemed proficient, which is within about 3 years, then they're mainstreamed into the regular classroom. Whether they're really ready or not, we're never quite sure. Most of the time they are not. And then these students continue to struggle, as we see every day at work. Bilingual education. There's 3 components of bilingual education. There's transitional, which is students receive content area instruction in their native language while learning English as a second language. There's developmental, which proceeds in the same way, except this approach helps to develop biliteracy because instruction is comprehensive and long-term. And this is the positive effect of developmental. And then there is the two-way, which this integrates students whose native language is English, and they are immersed into students who are ELL. And the goal with this is to achieve a positive cross-cultural attitude among our students. Okay, so approaches to teaching English and language learners, if we can follow through with my PowerPoint presentation. Teachers, any questions? Okay, so I will continue. Comprehensive. We should always have comprehensive input. That is, cues that are contextualized in our instruction, in teaching. Teachers should attend conferences and host a variety of PDs, such as this one, to teach other teachers about bilingual education and about our ELL population and how to help them. We have to accept our students' identities. Something as simple as making sure we pronounce our students' names correctly could be something small for us, but it's something so big for them. Just for my brief history, when I came into this country, I'm from India. My name is Paramjeet. None of my teachers could pronounce that name, even though it had all the vowels, and I would explain to them, this is how you would pronounce it. And until they pronounced my name correctly, I would not let go. So every time they would say my name, I would raise my hand and I would say, no, it's Paramjeet. It is Paramjeet, until they saw that as a positive aspect, and then they would make sure that they would pronounce my name correctly, because that was part of my culture, is the way you say my name. And so if we have someone in our classroom, for example, if I have a Marisol, I make sure I call her Marisol and not Marisol, because this is the way in her culture it is pronounced Marisol. So this is a small thing that we can do for our students, and is by accepting their identities. We have to create a multiliterate print environment in our classroom. We can even create audio recordings of songs and stories in our students' primary languages. All these things are fun, really comprehensive ways to input into our everyday curriculum for our students. It is our responsibility, especially here, especially in a nation where 80% of our learners are Hispanic, minority learners are Hispanic students. We have to learn about their culture so that we can help them and have them feel comfortable. At our school here at ABC Elementary, another reason we're having this PD is because we're in the process of adopting or going through as a whole school for the following school year an ELL program that is integrated. So I'm going to briefly talk about the integrated and the designated ELL programs, and then for a fun little culminating activity, I'm going to just do like a model lesson, and just so that you know what you can take back into your classroom and how you can have an ELL lesson that is integrated into your everyday curriculum. So briefly, overview of a designated ELL program is focus on ELL students. Grouping is leveled clusters. Time is usually about 30 minutes a day. Planning is always intentional, and content access and understanding for all students. Now the draft that we are going to implement is the integrated ELL program. We are going to be focusing on content. Secondary focus is on the ELL student. Its time frame is all day long. Grouping is heterogeneous and intentional planning. Okay, so what exactly does this look like? So just as a mock lesson, just very briefly for a few minutes, I'm going to have Mr. Smith here be Antonio for today. And here's a way that you can integrate an ELL lesson for science. So I happen to teach second grade here at ABC Elementary, and we are covering our second grade science unit on toads and frogs. So all week long we have been learning about amphibians, right Antonio? And what are the two amphibians that we have been learning about?
Frogs and toads.
Frogs and toads. Now Antonio, what is one similarity between a frog and a toad?
They both have similar habitats.
Habitats. Wow, that's a fancy word, Antonio. I like that. What is one? Let's continue with the lesson. So Antonio, can you tell me one difference between a frog and a toad?
The toad has bumpy skin and the frog has smooth skin.
Very good. As one can notice that I'm not using words such as same and not same, simple words. Teachers should expect a lot from their ELL kids just because English is not their primary language means that they are not intelligent enough to grasp new vocabulary. So use fancy words with them like similarities and differences instead of using same and not same. And a fun little activities that you could do beforehand is whatever unit that we are planning on, we can kind of compare words that could be found in both languages. For example, Antonio here, when we were studying about the habitat, they all knew exactly what a habitat was. So I used the word in my lesson, habitat, even though it's a fancy word. Instead of saying home, where do they live, what is their home, use fancy words like what is their habitat. And as one can see, and I printed this out for each one of my students, very similarity. So this is a fun little side project for us. Tropical in English means the same, is said pretty much the same, tropical in Spanish, so my kids knew exactly what that meant. And humid, humido, habitat, el habitat, desert, desierto. So don't be afraid, teachers, to use fancy words with your kids. And if it takes a few minutes, it's part of our lesson planning to integrate a part of their language into the lessons to make it fascinating for them so they can be a part of the lesson. Then it really opens up the lesson for them. Okay, so Antonio, so what is a type of a thinking map that we can use to describe the differences and the similarities of frogs and toads?
A double bubble.
A double bubble, that's great. Here is an example of a double bubble. Now this looks like an intimidating piece of paper, but for my ELL students, they're very familiar with it because they are expected to fill it out just as my English students, and they have the skills and the abilities to fill out. So the main thing is hold high standards for all of your students, including your ELL students. Use fancy words, and especially in subjects like social studies and science, which is so fascinating for all children. They just cannot get enough. So this complex thing is a web. It's replaced a Venn diagram. It's a double bubble where my kids would put frogs and toads and do their similarities, their differences, this is the things just about a frog, things just about a toad, and their similarities are here. And my kids know this inside and out. So good job, Antonio. So next week, we're going to continue learning about reptiles, and we're going to learn about the iguana. Are you excited?
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Okay, teachers. So that could be kind of like how your sample lesson can be. Have a variety of science texts in your classroom. Use fancy vocabulary, scientific terms. They can understand it, and you'll be surprised as how much they can learn from you spending maybe 5 minutes extra in integrating these terms into your daily language. And fortunately, as we strive for making our classrooms fully integrated in ELL instruction, we are going to always have some challenges. After the meeting, if you would like to come to me and talk about your challenges, I have more than enough time. We can discuss it. We can go online together. We can look into different research for any kind of questions that you might have, teachers. The main challenges that we all are faced with is that a lot of us are just not receiving adequate preparation and training to help our students, to guide our ELL students. A lot of teachers have low expectations of their ELLs, and that's why very briefly, as in my science units, I do anything but that. You should have high expectations, use high fancy vocabulary, have them participate and do things because they will have the skill set to do it if you make it exciting for them. It has nothing to do with their level of intelligence. The other challenges that schools have is in certain districts where there's a numerous amount of language groups, different language groups. This is especially true for districts with a high Asian population, where you may have groups speaking Korean, Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese within the same school. And of course, we don't have answers for those situations. And of course, providing bilingual programs for each small group is impossible. But bilingual and SEI programs should be used, especially in a school such as ours, where 70% of our students are Spanish-speaking kids. We owe it to them to implement their culture into our everyday learning. And the students that are not Hispanic, they love it also. they're just as fascinated about learning that tropical is the tropical, and they know exactly what that means. So instead of using baby words such as hot or cold, we use words like humid and tropical. And finally, another challenge that we face is that both bilingual and SEI programs tend to separate students from their peers, from instruction. That's why I think each school district has to focus on programs that they see best fit their population. And here at ABC Elementary, with a high percentage of Hispanic kids, we are going to focus on an integrated ELL program that's just not 30 minutes of the day, but basically it's an integrated whole part of the day, and to integrate it into math, science, language arts, art, music. It is only by doing all of these variety of activities with our students that we can see them succeed and move on to high places. Thank you very much. I don't know if I'd like